Why aren't you running the place anymore? Where is the estate that our father left you in the will?" My brother Arthur's voice cut through the air like a knife. He had just arrived, and the question left his mouth before he could even close the front door. I was standing in the middle of the living room, 73 years weighing heavily on my shoulders. My hands were still dirty with soil because I had been working in the vegetable garden until an hour ago. My brother looked at me with those eyes full of worry, waiting for an answer I did not want to give him. But before I could open my mouth, my son Mason stood up from the sofa, beaming, smiling as if he had just won the Powerball. "And now this is my wife's property," he announced, spreading his arms as if he were presenting a show. Victoria, sitting next to him, crossed her legs slowly, that thin, poisonous smile drawn on her face, like a newly crowned homecoming queen. The silence that followed was so heavy, I could feel it crushing my chest. Arthur blinked. Once, twice, as if Mason's words made no sense. He turned his head toward me, looking for confirmation, looking for me to tell him this was a bad joke. But I said nothing. I couldn't. Arthur thought for a few moments. I saw how his jaw tightened, how his fists slowly clenched at his sides. And then, what he did next filled me with a pride so deep I felt my heart was going to burst. But that would come later. First, I need to tell you how I got here, how I went from being the legitimate owner of 300 acres of fertile land to becoming an intruder in my own home. It all started 6 months before that day. I had managed the farm since William passed away, 15 years keeping his legacy alive. 15 years waking up at 5 in the morning, checking the crops, negotiating with buyers, paying the hands. The farm produced corn, soybeans, pumpkins. We had chickens, 3 dairy cows, 2 horses. We weren't rich, but we lived with dignity. Mason lived in the city. He and Victoria had a small apartment 2 hours south. He worked at a hardware store. She didn't work at all. They came to visit me once a month, always asking for money, always with some made-up emergency. "Mom, we need $2,000 for rent. Mom, the car broke down. We need $3,500 to fix it. Mom, Victoria needs surgery, $5,000. And I paid. Because he was my son. Because William had taught me that family always comes first. But it was never enough. One day in September, Mason arrived with papers in hand. Victoria came behind him, wearing that ivory dress she always wore for special occasions. High heels, even though we were going to walk on dirt. "Mom, I need you to sign this," Mason told me, spreading the documents on the kitchen table. "What is it?" I asked, drying my hands on my apron. "It's just some paperwork, to put the farm in my name. So I can help you better with the taxes, with the IRS, with the permits. You're getting older, Mom. Let me handle the hard stuff." I looked at the papers. The fine print, the legal terms I didn't completely understand. Mason handed me a pen. "Trust me, Mom." And I trusted him. I signed. 3 weeks later, Mason came back with more papers. This time, Victoria was the one who spoke. "Eleanor, we need you to sign a transfer, just to protect the property, for liability issues." Her voice was soft, almost maternal, as if she were the adult and I was the child. I signed again. I didn't know I was signing my own eviction. I didn't know that every signature was another nail in the coffin of my life. A month later, they arrived with a moving truck. Mason knocked on my bedroom door at 7 in the morning. "Mom, we need you to move." The words fell like stones. "What?" "The farm isn't yours anymore. It belongs to Victoria. I transferred it to her, and she wants to live here. You can stay in the back room, the small one. Or if you prefer, we can find you a place in town." I stood there looking at him, looking for the boy I had raised, the son I had nursed, who I had cared for when he had pneumonia at 7 years old, who I had held when his father died. But that boy wasn't there anymore. "Mason, your father left this farm to me." "No, Mom. Dad left you the right to manage it, but I am the legitimate heir, and now I decided to give it to my wife. It is legal. Everything is in order." Victoria appeared behind him, smiling. "Don't worry, Eleanor. You can visit whenever you want. But, obviously, you will need to call ahead. Visit me, in my own house." I packed my things that same afternoon. 2 suitcases with clothes, some photographs, William's pocket watch. I moved into the back room, a space of 10 feet by 10 feet. Without windows, with an old bed and a closet that smelled of mildew. For 2 months, I was a ghost on my own land. I watched Victoria rearranging the furniture, changing the curtains, ripping out the flowers I had planted. Mason avoided looking me in the eye. And then, that afternoon in March, Arthur arrived, and everything changed. Because in the pocket of my apron, folded in 4, was an envelope that had arrived that very morning. A cream-colored envelope with the seal of a law firm I didn't recognize. And inside that envelope, there was a letter that began like this. Dear Mrs. Eleanor, 15 years have passed since the passing of Mr. William. In accordance with his final instructions, it is time to reveal the truth. My fingers trembled while I held that paper. I still hadn't shown it to anyone. But now, with Arthur here, with Mason proudly announcing that he had given away my inheritance, with Victoria sitting like a usurping queen, now was the moment. I took the envelope out of my pocket, and the world was about to turn upside down. Arthur kept looking at me, waiting. His eyes went from me to Mason, from Mason to Victoria, trying to understand what on earth was happening in this house. Eleanor, my brother repeated, and this time his voice sounded harder. You are going to explain to me what this means. Mason laughed, a nervous laugh. Uncomfortable. Uncle Arthur, it's simple. Mom is getting older. She can't manage a property of this size anymore. I took the reins, and I decided that the best thing was to put everything in Victoria's name, to protect the family assets. Protect. Arthur took a step forward. Protect from whom? From your own mother. Victoria stood up, smoothing her salmon-colored dress. Always so composed. Always so perfect. Arthur, with all due respect, this is a family matter between Mason and his mother. I don't think it's appropriate for you to. I am her brother, Arthur interrupted, and his voice rumbled in the living room like thunder. I am the only family she has left besides this ungrateful boy. So yes, it is my business. The atmosphere became dense, heavy. Like before, a tornado touches down. I remained standing, in silence, with the envelope clutched between my fingers. I could feel the paper wrinkling under the pressure. My heart was beating so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Mason looked at Victoria. She made a subtle gesture with her head. Uncle, if you don't like how I handle my affairs, you can leave. This is my wife's house now, and she decides who enters and who leaves. Arthur went pale. I saw him clench his fists until his knuckles turned white. Your wife decides? He asked, almost in a whisper. And your mother? Your mother who worked this land for 15 years? She decides nothing. She can stay in the back room, Victoria said, as if she were offering a huge favor. We have given her a space. We didn't kick her out onto the street. How generous! Arthur spat. I saw that my brother was about to explode. I saw how his shoulders tensed, how his breathing accelerated. I knew that look. It was the same one he had when he was 17 and defended our mother from a man who tried to rob her at the market. But before he could do anything, before he could scream at them or punch something, I put my hand on his arm. Arthur, I said softly. Wait. He looked at me, confused. I took the envelope out of my apron. Mason saw it first. His expression changed, from arrogance to curiosity. What is that, Mom? I didn't answer. Instead, I began to open the envelope slowly, very slowly. I could feel everyone's eyes pinned on my trembling hands. Inside was a letter, 2 folded pages. Thick paper, ivory-colored, with the gold letterhead of a law firm, Sterling and Associates, specialized legal services. I began to read aloud. Dear Mrs. Eleanor, 15 years have passed since the passing of Mr. William. In accordance with his final instructions, it is time to reveal the truth about his will and the special provisions he left in the custody of our firm. My voice was shaking. I had to stop a moment to breathe. Mason took a step toward me. What will? Dad didn't leave any will other than the one we already know. I kept reading. Mr. William, in full possession of his mental faculties, drafted an additional document 3 months before his passing. This document includes specific clauses that were only to be activated under certain conditions. One of those conditions was the following. If at any time you, Eleanor, were unjustly stripped of the property he bequeathed, this second will would come into effect automatically. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria stopped smiling. Mason went pale. "That is impossible," my son murmured. "I checked all the papers when Dad died. There was no second will. Because your father left it in the custody of a lawyer," I continued reading, "with specific instructions not to reveal it unless it was absolutely necessary. And that moment has arrived." Arthur took the letter from my hands. His eyes scanned the words quickly. I saw how his expression changed from confusion to astonishment. "My God," he whispered. "Eleanor, does this say what I think it says?" "What does it say?" Victoria screamed, losing that perfect composure for the first time. "What does that damn letter say?" Arthur looked at her with a mixture of contempt and satisfaction. "It says that William knew exactly what kind of person his son was, and he took precautions." Mason snatched the letter from Arthur's hands. He read in silence, his lips moving without sound. With every line he read, his face turned grayer. "No, it can't be." Victoria snatched the paper from him. She read. And then something in her broke. I saw her hands start to shake. "This isn't legal," she said, but her voice no longer had any strength. "This cannot be legal." "It is completely legal," Arthur responded. "And it says here that there is a meeting scheduled. At the law firm. The day after tomorrow. At 10 in the morning. And we are all summoned." I looked at Mason. My son, the boy who had grown up in this house, who had run through these fields, who had cried in my arms when he fell out of a tree and broke his arm. Now he looked at me with fear. "Mom, I didn't know. I thought everything was mine by right." "By right," I repeated, and my voice sounded colder than I intended. "What right do you have to take the house away from your mother?" He didn't answer. Victoria let the letter fall to the floor. She brought her hands to her face. For a moment, I thought she was going to cry, but no. She was just breathing heavily, trying to maintain control. "I need air," she announced, and left the living room. I heard her go up the stairs. A door slammed shut upstairs. Mason remained there, standing, not knowing what to do, looking at the paper on the floor as if it were a venomous snake. Arthur picked up the letter and gave it back to me. "Why didn't you tell me this had arrived?" he asked softly. "It arrived this morning," I answered. "I haven't had time to process it, to understand what it means." "It means," Arthur said, and a small smile appeared on his face, "that your husband protected you even after death." Those words hit me with unexpected force. I felt tears starting to gather in my eyes. 15 years. 15 years missing him. 15 years thinking I was alone. And it turns out I never was. William had foreseen this. He had seen something in Mason that I refused to see, and he had taken measures. "What exactly does that second will say?" Mason asked, and his voice sounded small, broken. Arthur read the last page of the letter. It says that the day after tomorrow, in the presence of the attorney Catherine Sterling, the full content of the document will be revealed, and that any transfer of property made without your informed consent, Eleanor, will be considered null and void. Mason let himself fall onto the sofa. He put his head in his hands. "We are ruined," he murmured. "Victoria is going to kill me. She sold her car. We used that money to remodel the kitchen. We thought the farm was ours. I didn't feel pity for him. I should. He was my son. But something inside me had broken these last few months. Something that couldn't be repaired with simple apologies. "We're leaving," Arthur said, taking me by the arm. "Eleanor, pack your things. You're coming with me until this is resolved." "No," I said, and my own firmness surprised me. "I am staying here. It is my house, and I am going to stay until this is over." Arthur looked at me with pride. Mason raised his head. "Mom, the day after tomorrow," I interrupted. "We will talk the day after tomorrow. At the law firm. When everything comes to light." He nodded, defeated. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed in my tiny room, looking at the ceiling, with the letter on my chest. I listened to Victoria and Mason arguing upstairs, muffled screams, crying, accusations, and I, for the first time in months, felt something resembling peace, because I knew that William had thought of me, and that justice, finally, was arriving. The 2 days that followed were the longest of my life. Victoria and Mason locked themselves in their room. They barely came down. When they did, they avoided my gaze, as if I were a ghost, as if seeing me reminded them of what they had done. Arthur came to stay with me. He slept on the living room couch. He didn't want to leave me alone. He said he didn't trust that Mason wouldn't try something desperate. I told him my son wasn't capable of physically hurting me. But the truth is, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. The morning of the meeting dawned gray. Low clouds covered the sky. The air smelled of rain. I dressed in the only suit I had, sand-colored, with a cream blouse that had belonged to my mother. I brushed my hair and gathered it in a low bun. I wanted to look dignified. I wanted William, wherever he was, to feel proud. Arthur was waiting for me in the truck. Mason and Victoria came out of the house 5 minutes later. She was wearing dark sunglasses even though there was no Sunday. He had deep circles under his eyes. Neither said a word. The trip to town took 40 minutes. No one spoke. Only the sound of the engine and the dirt road under the tires. I looked out the window. The fields we had planted together, William and I. The trees he had planted when Mason was small. Everything was still there, silent witness to our history. The law firm was in the center of town. A 2-story building, painted mustard yellow with white windows. We all entered together, but separated, like strangers forced to share a space. The receptionist was waiting for us. A young woman with her hair in a ponytail. "The family of William Miller?" she asked. Arthur nodded. "Attorney Catherine is waiting for you. 2nd floor. Last door on the right." We walked up the stairs in silence. Every step resonated like a hammer hitting metal. Mason was in front, Victoria behind him, clinging to his arm. Arthur and I brought up the rear. The door had a gold plaque, Catherine Sterling, Family and Succession Law. Mason knocked. A female voice responded from inside. "Come in." The office was spacious. Shelves full of law books covered the walls. A dark wood desk dominated the center, and behind that desk, a woman of about 50 was observing us. Graying hair pulled back in an elegant bun, thin-rimmed glasses, dark gray suit. "Come in, please. Take a seat." There were 6 chairs in front of the desk. Mason and Victoria sat together. Arthur and I sat on the other side, leaving 2 empty chairs between us. Catherine studied us all with those piercing eyes, as if she could read our souls. "Thank you for coming. I know this situation is unusual, but Mr. William left very specific instructions, and it is my duty to execute them to the letter." She opened a thick folder on her desk. Inside were documents, photographs, papers yellowed by time. "I met Mr. William 16 years ago," Catherine began. "He came to my office with a particular request. He wanted to create a will with conditional clauses, something I have only done 3 times in my entire career." Mason leaned forward. "Why did he never tell us anything? Why all the secrecy?" Catherine looked at him fixedly. "Because, Mr. Mason, your father knew your character, and he feared exactly what ended up happening." The words fell like stones. Mason sank into his seat. 3 months before his death, Catherine continued, "William came to see me for the last time. He was sick. He knew he didn't have much time left. He handed me this sealed envelope." She held up a large brown envelope with the red wax seal still intact. "He gave me precise instructions. If during the first 15 years after his death, his wife Eleanor was stripped of the inherited property, I was to open this envelope and execute the instructions contained within." My heart was beating so fast I felt it was going to jump out of my chest. Catherine broke the seal. The sound of wax cracking resonated in the office like a gunshot. She took out several documents. She spread them on the desk. "This," she said, lifting the first one, "is the original will that everyone knows, the one that was read after the funeral. In it, William left the 300-acre farm to his wife Eleanor, with the instruction that upon her death it would pass to his son Mason. Mason nodded. Victoria squeezed his hand. But what no one knew, Catherine continued, is that this 300-acre farm was not William's only property. The silence was so dense you could touch it. "What?" I whispered. Catherine looked at me with something resembling compassion. "Eleanor, your husband was a very cautious man. 20 years ago, before Mason was born, he bought another property. 500 acres to the north, near the river. He bought it under the name of a corporation. No one knew. Not even you." I felt the floor move beneath my feet. 500 acres. Yes, and not only that. He also had 3 bank accounts that you were unaware of. 1 in this town, 2 in the state capital. With a total of $240,000 saved. The world ceased to exist for a moment. I only heard my breathing. I only felt my heart pounding against my ribs. Mason stood up abruptly. "That is impossible. My father didn't have that money. We lived modestly. If he had had that much, he would have told us." "He didn't tell you," Catherine responded calmly, "because he didn't want you to depend on him. He wanted Mason to learn to work, to earn things for himself. But, more importantly, he wanted to protect Eleanor. Because he knew, with a certainty that was captured in this letter, she lifted another document, that his son would try to take what was hers." Victoria started to cry. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of frustration, of the sound of a perfect plan crumbling. "This can't be happening," she murmured between sobs. "We need that land. We have debts. We have—" "You have the property that Mason inherited legitimately," Catherine interrupted. "A plot of 80 acres on the east side. That property does belong to Mason. But the 300-acre farm where you currently live, that was always Eleanor's. And all transfers that were made without her informed consent are void." "She signed," Mason screamed. "She signed the papers. She signed under deception," Catherine responded, and her voice became cold as ice. "She signed because her own son lied to her. He told her it was just to help her with administrative paperwork. That is called fraud, Mr. Mason. And it is a criminal offense." The silence that followed was devastating. Arthur took my hand. His was warm. Mine was freezing. "So," my brother said, "what does all this mean exactly?" Catherine took out another document. This one was new, freshly printed. "It means that, as of this moment, Eleanor is the absolute owner of the 300-acre farm where she currently resides, the property of 500 acres north of the river. The 3 bank accounts, with a total of $240,000. And furthermore," she paused, as if she were savoring the moment. "William left instructions that if this happened, if his son tried to dispossess his mother, then Mason would also lose his inheritance of 80 acres. "No!" Victoria screamed. "That isn't fair." "Fair." Catherine's voice rose for the first time. "Does it seem fair to you to kick a 73-year-old woman out of her own home? Does it seem fair to manipulate her to steal her inheritance?" Victoria fell silent. Mason had his head in his hands. He was breathing raggedly, as if he were about to vomit. "However," Catherine continued, and her tone softened slightly, "William left a final clause, an opportunity. If Mason demonstrates genuine remorse, if he returns everything he took, if he asks his mother for forgiveness on his knees, then, and only then, Eleanor can decide if she returns the 80 acres to him. Or not." Everyone looked at me. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to feel. My husband had built a safety net so elaborate it left me breathless. He had foreseen the betrayal, and he had punished it. But he had also left room for forgiveness. Typical of William, always believing in second chances. Mason raised his head. His eyes were red, swollen. He looked at me as if he were seeing a stranger. "Mom," his voice broke. "Mom, I didn't know. I thought Dad had left you only the administration. I thought I was the main heir. Victoria convinced me it was the right thing." "Don't blame me," Victoria exploded, standing up. "You wanted the land too. You also thought your mother was a burden." The poison in her words filled the room. Mason looked at her with a mixture of surprise and horror, as if he were just seeing who the woman he had married really was. Catherine hit the desk with the palm of her hand. The sound made us all jump. Enough. This isn't couples therapy. I am here to execute the will of a dead man who loved his wife more than you two will ever understand. Victoria let herself fall back into the chair. She crossed her arms like a punished child. Catherine turned toward me. Eleanor, these are the property documents. All in your name. Here is also the access to the bank accounts. And here, she took out a smaller, cream-colored envelope with my name written in William's handwriting. This is from your husband, a letter. He asked me to give it to you only if this day arrived. My hands were shaking when I took the envelope. It was heavy. I could feel several pages inside. William's handwriting on the front made me feel as if he were there, in that room, holding my hand. Can I read it here? I asked with a trembling voice. It is yours, Catherine responded softly. You can do whatever you want with it. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were 3 handwritten pages. William's shaky handwriting and his last months of life. I began to read in silence, but Arthur put his hand on my shoulder. Read it out loud, Eleanor, so everyone knows what kind of man my brother-in-law was. I took a deep breath, and I began. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means that my worst fears came true. It means that our son did exactly what I hoped he wouldn't do. And for that, my love, I ask for your forgiveness. My voice broke. I had to stop a moment. Forgive me for not telling you the truth about the money. Forgive me for keeping secrets from you. But I knew that if I told you, you would insist on sharing everything with Mason. Because that is your nature. You give without expecting anything in return. You love unconditionally, and that is one of the 1,000 reasons why I chose you as my wife. Mason choked back a sob. I didn't look at him. I continued reading. But I saw things in our son that you didn't want to see. I saw him look with envy at what others had. I saw him lie about small things. I saw him take shortcuts instead of working hard. And I knew, with a certainty that broke my heart, that someday he would try to take what is yours. Dad, Mason whispered, but no one paid attention to him. So I did the only thing I could do. I protected you. I saved in secret. I bought land that no one knew about. I prepared a plan for when I was no longer there. Because I knew that without me there to guide him, Mason would take the easy path. The wrong path. My tears fell on the paper, staining the ink. But I kept reading. Now you have a decision to make, my love. You can forgive him. You can give him another chance. Or you can let him learn the hardest lesson of his life. I won't tell you what to do. I will only tell you this. Whatever you do, I will be proud of you. Because I know you will make the right decision. The one that allows you to sleep in peace. My voice dropped to a whisper for the last lines. I loved you from the day I met you at the county fair. You were 18 years old and wearing a lavender dress. You were laughing with your friends. And I knew, in that instant, that I would spend the rest of my life trying to make you laugh like that. I hope I achieved it. I hope I was the husband you deserved. And I hope, wherever I am now, to be able to see you grow old with dignity. With love, with your head held high, always yours. William. The silence that followed was absolute. Only Mason's stifled sobs were heard. The sound of Victoria breathing raggedly. The ticking of the clock on the wall. I folded the letter carefully. I put it in my purse. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I looked at Mason, my son, my boy. The baby born on a stormy night 42 years ago. The boy who had learned to walk holding on to my skirt. The young man who had cried in my arms when his first love rejected him, but also the man who had lied to me. The man who had taken my home. The man who had made me feel invisible in my own house. Mason, I said, and my voice sounded firmer than I felt. Your father gave you a chance. He left you 80 acres, fertile land. A start. But you lost it. You lost it because you chose greed over love. Deception over honesty. Mom, please. I raised my hand. He fell silent. I haven't finished. Your father also gave me a choice. I can forgive you. I can return what you lost. But not now. Right now, the only thing I feel is disappointment and sadness. Because the son I raised wouldn't have done this. The son I raised knew how to distinguish between right and wrong. Mason slid off his chair. He literally let himself fall to his knees on the floor of that office. Hands clasped, face covered in tears. "Mom, forgive me. Please. I am so sorry. You are right. Dad was right. I was weak. I was greedy. But I swear to you, I am going to change. Give me a chance. Just one." Victoria looked at him from her chair. Her expression was unreadable. She didn't try to console him. She said nothing. Arthur leaned toward me. "What are you going to do?" he whispered. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I still don't know." Catherine intervened. "You don't have to decide now, Eleanor. These documents," she pushed a folder toward me, "they give you absolute ownership over everything. Mason and his wife have 30 days to vacate the 300-acre farm. After that, if they are still there, I can initiate a legal eviction process." 30 days, I repeated. Mason remained on his knees, shaking. "Mom, where are we going to live? We have no money." We sold everything thinking the farm was ours. For the first time, I felt something resembling compassion, but it was weak, like a candle flickering in the middle of a storm. "You have the 80 acres, I said finally. "Build something there. There is an old barn. You can live in it temporarily. Fix it up. Make it your home. Prove to me that you can work. That you can earn things honestly." Mason looked up. There was hope in his eyes. "Really? You're going to let us keep those 80 acres? Your father left them to you. I am not going to take them from you. But I am not going to give you anything else either. You are going to have to learn to live with what you have. Like I did. Like your father did." Victoria finally spoke. 80 acres is nothing. How are we supposed to survive on that?" Arthur laughed. It was a dry laugh, without humor. "Eleanor survived on 300 acres and no support for 15 years. You are two people. You are young. If you can't survive on 80 acres, then the problem isn't the land. The problem is you." Victoria clenched her jaw, but she didn't answer. Catherine pushed a last document toward Mason. "Sign here. It is an agreement where you acknowledge that the transfer of property to your wife was fraudulent and that you accept the conditions imposed by your father's will." Mason took the pen. His hands were shaking so much he could barely write. But he signed, in 3 different places. Victoria also had to sign. She did it with so much force, she almost tore the paper. "Done," Catherine said, putting the documents away. "Eleanor, these are your new property deeds. And here are the access cards for the bank accounts. There is also a key." She took out an old brass key. "This is for the house on the northern property, the river estate. No one has lived there in years, but it is in good condition. If you want to see it, I can take you tomorrow." I took the key. It was heavy, cold, real. Everything was real. William had left me a secret empire, and now it was mine. We left the law firm in silence. The sky was still gray. It was starting to drizzle, small drops that crashed against the pavement like cold tears. Mason and Victoria left in their car without saying a word. I watched them get in. I saw how Mason could barely put the key in the ignition, how his hands kept shaking. Victoria stared out the window, jaw clenched, fists closed in her lap. Arthur took me to a small cafe on the corner. I needed to sit down. I needed to process what had just happened. We ordered 2 cups of hot chocolate. I couldn't drink. I just held the cup between my hands, letting the heat penetrate my cold skin. "How do you feel?" Arthur asked finally. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I feel like I'm floating, as if none of this were real." "It is real, Eleanor. William protected you, like he always did." The tears started to fall. I couldn't stop them. I cried there, in that small cafe, while the rain hit the windows. I cried for William, for the 15 years I had spent alone, for Mason's betrayal, for everything. Arthur said nothing. He just put his hand on mine and let me cry. When I finally calmed down, he asked something that had been going around in my head. "Are you going to forgive him?" "I don't know," I whispered. "A part of me wants to forgive him. He is my son. But another part feels that if I forgive him now, he will never learn." "Your father was like that," Arthur said thoughtfully. "He never forgave easily. He used to say that forgiveness without consequences isn't forgiveness, it's complicity. Those words resonated in my chest. Complicity. Had that been me all these years? An accomplice to Mason's weakness? To his lack of character? I need to see that property, I said suddenly. The one by the river. I need to know what else William left me. Arthur smiled. I'll call Catherine. Let's ask her to take us now. An hour later, the three of us were in Catherine's car heading north. The rain had stopped. The sun was trying to come out between the clouds. We crossed green fields, small towns, red dirt roads. William bought this property 25 years ago, Catherine explained while driving. He paid $30,000. It was considered a bad deal back then. The land was neglected, but he saw potential. How is it that he never told me anything, I asked, more to myself than to her. Because he knew you, Catherine answered softly. He knew that if he told you, you would want to share it with Mason immediately. And he didn't want that. He wanted Mason to earn things. We arrived after 40 minutes. A wooden gate marked the entrance. Catherine took out a key and opened it. We entered down a path bordered by tall trees, century-old oaks. Their branches created a green tunnel over us. And then I saw it. The house. It wasn't huge. It wasn't a mansion. But it was beautiful. Gray stone and dark wood. 2 stories. A wide porch with white columns. Large windows that reflected the sky. And behind the house, extending as far as the eye could see, rolling fields that sloped down toward a silver river. I was left breathless. My God, Arthur whispered. This is it. A paradise. I finished. We got out of the car. I walked slowly toward the house, my feet on the gravel, the smell of wet earth, the sound of the river in the distance. Catherine opened the front door. We went in. The interior smelled of old wood and stopped time. There were furniture pieces covered with white sheets, a wooden floor that creaked under our steps, a stone fireplace in the living room, huge windows that let the light in. I went up the stairs. Upstairs there were 4 bedrooms. I entered the largest one. It had a direct view of the river. I could see the water gliding smoothly between the rocks. I could see birds flying in circles. In a corner of the room was a wooden box. It had my name carved on the lid. I knelt in front of it. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them. Photos of William and me in our youth, of our wedding, of Mason when he was a baby. Photos that I thought had been lost in a flood years ago. But William had saved them. He had kept them here, for me. Under the photos was a notebook. I opened it. It was a journal. William's handwriting filled every page. I read the first entry, the 15th of March, 2010. Today I bought the river property. Eleanor doesn't know. Someday I will tell her. Or maybe not. Maybe this will be my final gift to her. A place where she can be free, where she can start over if everything else fails. The tears returned. But this time they weren't of sadness. They were of gratitude, of love, of wonder at a man who had thought of me even when I didn't think of myself. Arthur appeared in the doorway. Eleanor. I'm okay, I said, wiping my tears. I'm okay. He came in and sat beside me on the floor. What are you going to do with all this? I looked out the window. The fields, the river, the sky opening up after the storm. I am going to live, I said finally. I am going to live the life William wanted for me. And Mason. Mason has his chance. He has 80 acres, a barn, a possibility to start over. It depends on him what he does with that. We spent the rest of the day exploring the property. There was an empty stable that could become something useful. There were fields that only needed attention to produce again. There was a small abandoned orchard with fruit trees that still bore fruit. It was a blank canvas. And it was mine. That night, Arthur took me back to the 300-acre farm. Mason and Victoria had already packed some things. Boxes stacked in the living room, suitcases by the door. Mason saw me enter. He approached timidly. Mom, we need to talk about the next few days. We need time to. You have 30 days, I interrupted. As Catherine said, use that time wisely. And after? Can we visit you? We can. After? I said wearily. We'll see. First, I want to see what you do with what you have. I want to see if you really change. Or if this was just an act. Victoria appeared behind him. She wasn't wearing her elegant clothes anymore. She had on jeans and a simple shirt. No makeup. No jewelry. Eleanor, she said, and for the first time her voice didn't have that condescending tone. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but could we take some chickens? And maybe one of the cows? To start. I looked at her. I really looked at her. And I saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear. Real vulnerability. You can take 6 chickens, I said finally. And the youngest cow. But that is all. The rest stays here. Thank you, she whispered. And it sounded genuine. I went up to my room. The big one. The one that had been mine before they took it from me. Someone had changed the sheets. There were fresh flowers on the nightstand. A small gesture, but meaningful. I lay down in that bed, in my bed, and looked at the ceiling. I thought of William, of how he had planned all this, of how he had loved me enough to protect me even after death. Thank you, I whispered to the air. Thank you, my love. And for the first time in months, I slept in peace. The following days were strange. Mason and Victoria worked in silence, packing their things. I spent my time making plans. Plans for the river farm. Plans for my new life. Arthur helped me. Also Betty, my old friend from town. I told her everything. She cried with me. Then she laughed with me. And finally, she helped me dream. What are you going to do with so much space? Betty asked one day while we drank coffee in my kitchen. I still don't know, I admitted. But I want it to be something meaningful, something that helps others. You were always like that, Betty said with a smile. Always thinking of others. But this time, I was also thinking of myself. For the first time in my life, I was putting my needs first, and it felt good. It felt like freedom. The 28th day arrived faster than I expected. Mason and Victoria had finished packing. Their truck was loaded with boxes, old furniture, the 6 chickens in makeshift cages, and the young cow tied in the back. I was on the porch when they came out. Mason approached first. He had deep circles under his eyes. He had lost weight. The last few weeks had been hard for him. Mom, he said, stopping a few feet away. I just wanted to say thank you for letting us keep the 80 acres, for giving us this chance. I didn't answer immediately. I looked at him. I really looked at him, and I saw something different. I wasn't sure if it was genuine regret or simple desperation. Time would tell. Mason, I said finally, your father loved you, and I love you too. But love doesn't mean allowing someone to hurt you over and over again. You have a chance to show us, your father and me, that you can be better. I will, he promised. I swear to you. Victoria stayed by the truck. She didn't come closer. She just raised her hand in a small gesture. Half wave, half apology, I watched them drive away down the dirt road, the truck kicking up dust, the chickens clucking in their cages, and I felt something strange in my chest. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was more like closing a chapter, like turning the corner of a page I had read too many times. Arthur appeared at my side. How do you feel? Free, I answered, and it was true. The following months were of transformation. I hired a crew of workers to clean and restore the river house. They sanded the floors. They painted the walls a soft ivory. They repaired the roof. They cleaned the windows until they shone like mirrors. Betty came with me every day. She had wonderful ideas. Terracotta curtains for the living room, pots with aromatic herbs in the kitchen, a wildflower garden in front of the house. This is coming out beautiful, Betty said, admiring our work. William would be proud. One afternoon, while we were working in the garden, Betty asked a question that had been going around in my mind. Eleanor, what are you going to do with all this land? It's 500 acres. Too much for one person. I sat on the damp earth, my hands dirty, the sun warming my back. I've been thinking about that, I said slowly, and I think I have an idea. I told her my plan. While I spoke, I saw Betty's eyes light up. It's perfect, she whispered when I finished. It is absolutely perfect. My idea was simple, but meaningful. I wanted to turn part of the property into an agricultural cooperative for older women, women like me, women who had been left behind by their families, women who still had strength, knowledge, and desire to work, but who no one valued. I would give them small plots. I would teach them to farm. We would sell the products together. We would share the profits. And more importantly, we would create a community, a chosen family. I hired Catherine to help me with the legal aspects. She was delighted. This is exactly the type of project William would have supported, she told me while we reviewed the documents. He always believed in the power of community. I started to spread the word. I spoke with the parish priest in town. I put ads on the local radio. And slowly, the women started to arrive. The first was Margaret, 68 years old. Her son had left her in a nursing home. She escaped and came walking to my door. "I heard you are looking for women who know how to work the land," she said, chin held high. "I grew up on a ranch. I can do anything." I hired her on the spot. Then came Helen. No, not the lawyer. Another Helen, 72 years old, widow. Her children had moved to the West Coast and never called. "I just want to feel useful again," she told me with tears in her eyes. "I want to have a purpose." "Here you will have it," I promised her. One by one, they kept coming. Women with stories similar to mine. Women who had been invisible, forgotten, discarded. I gave them small cabins that we built on the property. Nothing fancy, but warm, clean, with dignity. I taught them everything William had taught me. How to prepare the soil, when to sow, how to care for the crops. And they taught me things I didn't know. Old recipes, techniques from their own grandmothers, work songs that made the hours pass faster. 6 months after Mason left, our cooperative had 12 members. We grew tomatoes, lettuce, pumpkins, herbs. We had chickens that laid golden eggs, 2 goats that gave creamy milk. We sold our products at the town farmers market every Saturday. People started to know us. The River Women, they called us. And they bought everything from us, because our products were good, but also because they knew our story. They knew we were women who had picked ourselves up. One October morning, while I was watering the plants, I saw a familiar car in the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. It was Mason. He got out of the car slowly. He looked different, thinner, more weathered by the Sunday. Calloused hands, clothes stained with dirt. "Mom," he said when he reached where I was, "I know I shouldn't come without calling, but I needed you to see something." He took out his phone. He showed me photos. The 80 acres I had left him. He had built a small house. It wasn't perfect. The walls were a little crooked. The roof had uneven shingles, but it was made with his own hands. "I built it myself," he said with shy pride. "Victoria and I. It took us 4 months. It's not finished yet, but it's ours." I kept looking at the photos. There was a new chicken coop, a small but tidy vegetable garden, the cow with a newborn calf. "We planted corn," Mason continued, "and beans. The first harvest was small, but we sold it. We earned $2,300. It's little, I know, but we did it ourselves, without anyone's help." For the first time in a long time, I saw real pride in his eyes. Not arrogance, pride in honest work. "Victoria got a job," Mason added, "at a bakery in town. She gets up at 4 in the morning, kneads dough until noon, comes home exhausted. But it's different now. More humble, more real." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked softly. "Because I wanted you to know that we are trying. For real. We are learning to live with what we have, to earn things. Like you did. Like Dad did." I looked at my son, at this 42-year-old man who was finally growing up. "I am glad to hear that, Mason. Could I visit sometimes? Not to ask for anything, just to see you. So you know who I am trying to be." I thought about William's letter, about his words on second chances. "You can come on Sundays," I said finally, "for lunch. But if you lie to me again, if you try to take advantage again, it's over. Understood?" "Understood," he responded quickly. "I promise you, Mom, I won't fail you again. I hugged him. It was a short hug. There were still wounds to heal. But it was a start. I watched him drive away, and I realized that something had changed in me too. I was no longer the woman who forgave everything just to keep the peace. Now, I had boundaries. I had dignity. I had self-respect. And that, more than any property or money, was William's true gift. That night, the women of the cooperative made a community dinner. We cooked together. We laughed together. We told stories of our lives. Margaret talked about her granddaughter who had finally called her. Helen showed photos of the flowers she had planted. Another woman, Betty II, as we called her, sang a song her mother had taught her. And I sat there, surrounded by these strong and resilient women, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt that I belonged. I felt that I had a home. Not just a physical place, but a home in the deepest sense. A place where I was valued, respected, loved. That night, before sleeping, I took out William's letter. I had read it 100 times, but I always found something new in his words. Whatever you do, I will be proud of you. I smiled in the darkness. I hope you are watching this, my love, I whispered. I hope you are proud. And somehow, in the silence of the night, I felt his answer. He was proud, and I was proud of myself too. Sundays became something special. Mason arrived early, always with something in his hands. A bouquet of wildflowers that grew in his fields, a jar of honey he had bought at the market. Once he brought a pie that Victoria had baked. It was a little burnt on the edges, but the gesture mattered more than perfection. The first visits were awkward. We sat at the table with long silences between words. But with every passing Sunday, the conversations became easier, more genuine. Mason told me about his days, about how he had learned to fix fences, about the time a storm destroyed his first harvest and how he had to start over, about the nights when he and Victoria sat on the porch of their tiny house, exhausted but content, watching the stars. It's strange, Mom told me one Sunday while helping wash the dishes. I have less than ever, but I feel richer than when I thought I had everything. Those words touched me deep, because I knew exactly what he referred to. A year passed, then two. The cooperative grew to 22 women. We built more cabins. We expanded the crops. We started making preserves, jams, handmade soaps. Our reputation spread beyond the town. City stores started asking us for products. With the profits, I improved the facilities. We built a community hall where women could meet, knit, read, simply be together. I hired a teacher to give literacy classes to those who had never learned to read well, and a nurse who came twice a week for health checkups. This had become more than a cooperative. It was a sanctuary, a place where women forgotten by the world found their worth again. Arthur came to visit me every week. His health had declined a bit. He was 78 years old, but his spirit remained strong. "Look at what you built, sister," he would tell me, looking at the fields full of women working. William would be so proud. And our parents, too. One spring afternoon, 3 years after Mason left, I heard a car in the driveway. It wasn't Sunday. I peeked out the window and saw Mason get out. But he didn't come alone. Victoria was with him. It was the first time she had come since that horrible day at the law firm. Heavens, the memories of her arrogance, of her poisonous smile, still hurt. I went out to the porch. Mason looked nervous. Victoria stayed back, hands clasped in front of her. "Mom," Mason began, "I know it's not Sunday, but Victoria wanted to talk to you, and I thought that, well, that maybe it was time." I looked at Victoria. She wasn't wearing those elegant clothes anymore. She wore simple jeans and a pale green blouse. No makeup. Her hair pulled back in a low ponytail. She looked tired, but also more real, more human. "Eleanor," she said, and her voice trembled. "I know I don't deserve your time. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I've wanted to tell you something for 3 years. And if I don't say it now, I think I'll never have the courage." I waited. I wasn't going to make this easier for her. "I'm sorry," she continued, and tears began to roll down her cheeks. "I'm sorry for being so cruel, so greedy, so blind. I saw this farm and only saw money. I only saw an easy way to get what I wanted without working for it. And I convinced Mason it was the right thing. I manipulated everything, and I hurt you in ways I can never repair." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "These 3 years have been the hardest of my life, but also the most important. I learned what it means to work, what it means to earn your bread, what it means to value what you have. And I learned, too late, what it means to lose the respect of someone who should have been my family." The silence stretched between us. I could hear the wind moving the leaves of the trees, the singing of the birds, the distant voices of the women working in the fields. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Victoria said finally. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, truly, and that if you ever need anything, anything at all, I will be there, not to take, but to give." Mason put his hand on his wife's shoulder. The gesture was protective, loving. I looked at them both. This couple who had hurt me so much, who had taken my home, my dignity. But I also saw what they had become. People who had fallen and gotten back up, who had learned the hardest lesson of their lives. "Victoria," I said, and my voice sounded softer than I expected. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you think." She nodded, biting her lip. "But forgiveness," I continued, "is not something I can give just like that. It is earned, over time, with consistent actions, not with words." "I understand," she responded quickly. "I didn't expect." However, I interrupted her. "I can offer you something, if you are interested." Mason and Victoria looked at each other, confused. "I need help here," I explained. "The cooperative is growing. We have 22 women now, and we need someone to help us with sales. Someone who can take our products to bigger markets. Someone young, with energy." Mason's eyes widened. "You're offering us work. Paid work," I clarified. "It's not charity. I need reliable people. And you have shown, in these 3 years, that you can be. But it has to be clear. You would be working for me. You would take orders. And if I see a single sign of dishonesty again, it's over. Forever." Victoria started crying again. But these were different tears. Of relief, of gratitude. "Yes," she said with a broken voice. "Yes, please. We would do anything, whatever you need." "Then you start Monday," I said. 6 in the morning. "Victoria, you are going to help in the community kitchen. We need someone who knows how to make bread. Mason, you are going to handle delivery logistics. I have contacts in 3 cities that want our products. I need you to keep them happy." "We will," Mason promised. "We won't fail you, Mom." "I hope so," I responded. That night, the women of the cooperative asked me questions. They had seen Mason and Victoria. They knew who they were. They knew what they had done. "Are you sure about this?" Margaret asked, always the most direct. "That woman kicked you out of your own house." "I know," I answered. "But I also know that people can change. And if I don't give them the chance to prove it, what kind of person am I?" Betty, my old friend, smiled. "You are your father. Tough but fair. And you are William. Always believing in second chances." Mason and Victoria started the following Monday. I saw them arrive before dawn, ready to work. And they worked hard. Victoria in the kitchen, kneading bread since 5 in the morning. Mason carrying boxes, driving for hours to make deliveries, dealing with difficult clients. I didn't give them special treatment. They received no privileges. They were employees like any other. But with every passing week, I saw how they earned the respect of the other women. Victoria shared recipes. She helped those who were struggling. She smiled genuinely. Mason fixed things that broke. He helped carry heavy sacks. He never complained. 6 months later, Margaret approached me while I was pruning the roses. "I have to admit something," she said. "I didn't trust them. I thought they would hurt you again. But I've been watching, and I think they really changed." "I think so too," I responded. "Or at least, they are trying, and that is all I can ask." One afternoon, Victoria stayed after her shift. She found me on the porch, watching the sunset. "Can I sit?" she asked timidly. I nodded. We stayed in silence for a while, just the sound of the river in the distance, the wind in the trees. "I never had a mother," Victoria said suddenly. "I grew up in foster homes. From temporary family to temporary family, no one taught me what respect means, or gratitude, or genuine family love. I looked at her. I saw real vulnerability in her eyes. When I met Mason, she continued, I saw an opportunity, a family, security, and I clung to that in the wrong way. I thought taking was loving, that possessing was belonging. And now? I asked softly. Now I know I was wrong. Love is not taking, it is giving. It is working together. It is respecting. And family is not what you inherit. It is what you build. Her words touched me, because there was truth in them. Thank you for giving me this chance, Eleanor, she said, her voice breaking. I know I don't deserve it, but I promise you I am going to honor it every day. I know, I responded, and I really knew it. That night, I took out William's letter once more. I had read it so many times the corners were worn. But his words never lost power. Whatever you do, I will be proud of you. I hope this is the right thing, I whispered to the darkness. I hope I am doing what you would have done. And in the silence, I felt his answer. Not in words, but in the peace that filled my heart. I was doing the right thing. I was building something bigger than revenge. I was building a legacy. 5 years passed like a breath. The cooperative had become a nationally recognized model. Journalists came to do reports. Universities sent students to learn. Other communities wrote to us asking for advice to replicate our project. I was 78 years old, my hair completely white, my hands more wrinkled. But my spirit had never been more alive. Mason and Victoria were still working with us. They were no longer employees. They were part of the family. Victoria had developed a line of bakery products that was sold in 20 stores. Mason had expanded our distribution network to 8 cities. And most importantly, they had had a daughter. They named her Eleanor. Like me. When Mason told me 5 years ago, I cried. I cried because it meant they finally saw me. They valued me. They honored me. Little Eleanor was now 4 years old. She came with me to the fields. Her little hands helped pick cherry tomatoes. Her laughter filled the air. The women of the cooperative adored her. She was everyone's granddaughter. One Saturday in November, Arthur called me early. His voice sounded weak. Eleanor, I need you to come. It's urgent. I drove to his house in town. I found him in bed. Thinner. Paler. The doctor was there. Cancer. Arthur told me with a sad smile. Advanced stage. The doctors say, I have a few months, maybe less. The world stopped. Arthur. My brother. My rock. The man who had been by my side in the worst moment of my life. No, I whispered. It can't be. We all die, sister, he said with that quiet wisdom that had always characterized him. I had a good life. And the last few years, seeing you blossom, seeing what you built, that was a gift. I stayed with him that day, and the following days. Mason and Victoria managed the cooperative. The women sent food, flowers, prayers. Arthur and I talked about everything. About our childhood, about our parents, about William, about how life surprises us in ways we never imagine. Do you know what I admire most about you? He told me one afternoon while I peeled oranges for him, that you could have chosen resentment. You could have become bitter, but you chose to build. You chose to forgive. You chose love. I learned from the best, I answered, squeezing his hand. From Dad. From William. From you. Arthur died 3 weeks later, in peace, surrounded by love. His funeral was massive. He had been a beloved man in town. Just, honest, good. We buried him next to our parents. Mason carried the casket alongside other men from town. I saw my son crying openly, honoring the uncle who had been more of a father than he himself was for many years. That night, after the funeral, Mason came to sit with me on the porch. Mom, he said, his voice hoarse from crying so much. Uncle Arthur told me something a few weeks ago, before he got worse. What did he tell you? He told me he was proud of me, that he had seen my transformation, and that Dad would be proud too. Tears returned to his eyes. I don't know if I deserve those words, but I want to deserve them. Every day I want to be worthy of that pride. I hugged him. My son. My boy. You already are, I told him. You already are, son. The following months were of adjustment. Arthur's absence hurt like an open wound. But life went on. The cooperative kept growing. The women kept working. The products kept selling. One spring afternoon, I received a call from Catherine, the lawyer. Eleanor, I need you to come to my office. There is something you need to know. I went the next day. Catherine was waiting for me with a folder on her desk. Arthur came to see me 2 months before he died, she began. He updated his will, and he left specific instructions. She opened the folder. Inside were legal documents, photographs, letters. Your brother didn't have children. His wife died 10 years ago, so he left everything to 2 people, you and Mason. To Mason? I asked, surprised. Yes, he left his house in town to Mason and Victoria. He said they needed a bigger place to raise little Eleanor. And he left his savings, $50,000, to the cooperative, with instructions to use them to build a school. Tears rolled down my cheeks. A school, I repeated. He said that the women of the cooperative deserved a place where their grandchildren could learn, where education wasn't a privilege but a right, and that you would know exactly how to build it. That afternoon I shared the news with the women. There were tears, laughter, hugs, and a collective determination to honor Arthur's gift. We spent 6 months planning. We hired architects. We got permits. And, finally, we began construction. The school would take shape little by little. A simple but beautiful building. 3 classrooms, a library, a courtyard with fruit trees, and a mural at the entrance with the names of all the women of the cooperative. And in the center, in gold letters, in memory of Arthur Miller, who believed in second chances. Mason supervised the construction. He worked from dawn until dusk. Victoria organized events to raise additional funds. Little Eleanor, now 5 years old, helped paint the walls with her little hands. The opening was in autumn. We invited the whole town, the governor, journalists. But most importantly, we invited the grandchildren of all the women of the cooperative. 20 children, from babies to teenagers. Children of children who had abandoned their mothers, but who now, seeing what their grandmothers had built, were coming back, reconnecting, healing. I gave a speech that day. I had never spoken in public, but the words flowed naturally. This school, I said, my voice amplified by the microphone, is not just a building, it is a promise that no woman will be forgotten. No child will be left without education. No family will remain broken beyond repair. I looked at the women gathered. Margaret, now 75, still strong as an oak. Helen, knitting in her chair. Betty, my lifelong friend, smiling at me with pride. This school is the legacy of many people, I continued. Of my husband William, who protected me even after death. Of my brother, Arthur, who believed in justice and forgiveness. Of every woman here who refused to be invisible. Who refused to give up. I saw Mason in the crowd, Victoria by his side, little Eleanor in his arms. My family, broken and rebuilt. And this school, I said, my voice breaking with emotion, is a promise that love always wins. That kindness has power, that it is never too late to change, to grow, to become who you were meant to be. The applause was deafening. We cut the ribbon. The children ran inside, exploring their new classrooms. The women cried with joy. And I stood there, at the entrance, looking at everything we had built. Mason approached. He hugged me tight. Dad would be so proud. Mom. Uncle Arthur, too. But I am prouder than anyone. Because you took the pain and turned it into something beautiful. You took betrayal and turned it into redemption. It wasn't just me, I answered. It was all of us. Together. That night, after everyone left, I walked alone through the property. I passed by the fields where the women worked every day, by the cabins where they slept in peace, by the school that now stood like a beacon of hope. I reached the river. I sat on the bank. The water flowed gently. The moon was reflected on its silver surface. I took out William's letter. I had brought it with me. After all these years, it was still my source of strength. We did it, my love, I whispered to the wind. We built something that will last longer than us, something that will help generations. The wind blew softly, and I swear I heard his voice. I always knew you would. I smiled in the darkness. The stars shone above me. The river sang its eternal song. And I, Eleanor, at my 78 years, felt complete. I had lost a lot. I had been betrayed. I had fallen. But I had gotten up. And in that rising, I had found my true purpose. It wasn't just surviving. It was flourishing. 2 more years passed. The school blossomed with life. 30 children now attended daily. Not only grandchildren of the women of the cooperative, but also children from town whose parents couldn't afford private education. We had 3 teachers, a librarian, and a scholarship program that Victoria managed with absolute dedication. I was 80 years old. My knees protested when I got up. My back hurt after long days. But my heart remained strong. It kept beating with purpose. One May morning, while I drank coffee on the porch, little Eleanor appeared running. She was 7 years old now, long chestnut braids, bright eyes full of curiosity. "Grandma," she shouted, using the title I had earned with love. "Look what I found." She showed me a butterfly perched on her finger. Its wings were bright orange with black edges. The butterfly moved its wings slowly, like breathing. "It's beautiful," I said softly. The teacher taught us that butterflies were caterpillars before, that they had to lock themselves in a cocoon, and that it hurt. But when they came out, they could fly. Her words, so simple, so profound, hit my chest. "Yes, my love, that's right. You were a caterpillar too, Grandma." I smiled. This girl knew beyond her years. Yes, I was a caterpillar too. I was in a very dark cocoon for a while, but I learned to fly. "And now you teach other people to fly too," she said with the seriousness of an adult. "Like you taught my mom and my dad." I hugged her tight. This girl, named in my honor, represented everything I had fought to build. Hope, renewal, legacy. That afternoon, the cooperative organized a celebration. We were celebrating 10 years since our founding. 10 years since the first woman, Margaret, had arrived asking for a chance. Now we were 35 women. We had expanded to 200 acres of cultivation. We had contracts with 42 stores. We generated jobs for 15 additional people from town. And our school educated 30 children. Numbers. But behind every number there was a story. A transformed life. A dignity restored. During the celebration, every woman shared her testimony. Margaret talked about how her granddaughter now visited her every week. Helen showed the book she was writing about medicinal plants. Another woman, who had arrived 3 years ago unable to read, read a poem she had written herself. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up slowly, all eyes on me. 10 years ago I started. I was a broken woman. My home had been taken from me. My dignity, my sense of worth. I felt invisible, forgotten, discarded by my own family. The women nodded. They all knew that feeling. But then I discovered something. I discovered that my husband, a man who had died 15 years earlier, had been protecting me the whole time. He had left me not only properties and money, he had left me something much more valuable, the belief that I deserved more, that my life had value, that my story wasn't over. Tears began to flow. Not just mine, everyone's. And with that gift, I was able to give a gift to you. This place, this community, this family we chose. Because that is what we are. We are not united by blood. We are united by something stronger. We are united by survival, by resilience, by love. I looked at Mason and Victoria in the crowd. He had his arm around her. Both were crying. I also learned something about forgiveness, I continued. I learned that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean saying that what happened was okay. It means letting go of the poison that is killing you from the inside. It means giving someone the chance to be better. But it also means protecting yourself, setting boundaries, demanding respect. Mason nodded, his eyes red but full of gratitude. My son hurt me deeply, but he also learned. changed, grew, and now he is the man his father hoped he would be. Not because I demanded it, but because he chose to be. Victoria wiped her tears. Little Eleanor, sitting on her lap, looked at her grandmother with absolute admiration. "So today we celebrate 10 years, I said, my voice strengthening. But we don't celebrate a building. We don't celebrate numbers. We celebrate transformation. We celebrate that 35 women refuse to be invisible. We celebrate that 30 children have free education. We celebrate that an entire community learned that it is never too late to start over." The applause resonated throughout the property. The women stood up, Mason and Victoria too. And little Eleanor applauded with all her might, jumping with excitement. That night, after everyone left, I did something I had been postponing. I walked to the place where we had planted a memorial garden. Small plaques marked the names of those who were no longer with us. William, Arthur, 3 women from the cooperative who had passed away in these years. My parents. I knelt in front of William's plaque. I touched his name engraved in bronze. "Hello, my love," I whispered. 20 years have passed since you left. 20 years that seemed like a whole lifetime. I wonder if you can see what we built. If you can see that your plan worked, that you protected me even when I didn't know I needed protection. The wind blew softly. The leaves whispered. Mason is a good man now, finally. It took him 47 years, but he arrived. And we have a granddaughter, a beautiful, smart, kind girl. We call her Eleanor. I hope she makes you happy. I took out the letter. That letter I had read 1,000 times. That had been my anchor in the storm. "I am going to leave this letter here," I said, folding it carefully, "in a time capsule, so that someday, when little Eleanor is older, when I am no longer here, she can read it. So she knows where she came from. So she knows that true love never dies." I buried the letter in a small metal box under the plaque, along with photographs, with a lock of my hair, with a seed from the trees we had planted together, William and I, 50 years ago. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for loving me, for protecting me, for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." I stood up slowly, my knees protesting, but my heart light. I walked back to the house. The moon lit the path. The lights of the cabins flickered in the distance. The sound of the river singing its eternal song. I entered my room. The room in the house William had bought in secret. The house that had become the heart of a community. I sat by the window, looking at the stars, thinking about the whole journey traveled. It had started with an injustice, with betrayal, with pain, but it had ended with transformation, with community, with love. It hadn't been an easy road. There were days when I wanted to give up, days when the pain was too much, days when loneliness consumed me. But I didn't give up. And now, at my 80 years, I could look back and see that every pain had had a purpose. Every fall had taught me to get up stronger. Every betrayal had shown me the true value of loyalty. I thought of the words William had written at the end of his letter, the words that had become my mantra, "Love always wins." And he was right. Love had won. Not the blind love that forgives everything without consequences, not the weak love that allows abuse, but strong love. The love that protects, the love that demands growth, the love that builds legacies. I closed my eyes. I felt peace filling every cell of my body. I had been a caterpillar. I had been in the dark cocoon. I had fought to get out, and now I was flying, not alone, but surrounded by 35 women who had also learned to fly, surrounded by a family that had been broken and rebuilt, surrounded by a community that had learned that redemption is always possible. I opened my eyes one last time. I looked at the starry sky, and I smiled. "Legacy is not a monument," I whispered, remembering words I had heard once. "Legacy is a map we leave for others to find their way." And I had left a map from pain to purpose, from betrayal to transformation, from loneliness to community. A map that said, no matter how dark the cocoon is, you can always fly, you can always start over, you can always flourish. And with that thought, with that deep knowledge in my soul, I closed my eyes and slept, in peace, in fullness, in love, because I had lived. I had loved. I had lost. I had won. And in the end, I had flown.